So of course the Palestinians are going to be like, we're not going to accept anything with you guys because you guys are coming in and stealing our land. You guys are pushing us out of our...
We can move to the next point.
All right, let's go to 47.
Wait, just real quick. I'm just going to ask for one thing. I don't do this in general debates, but I'm just curious.
Sure.
Okay, and if you don't have it on hand, that's fine. But like, what is our source here for like Jews stealing the land? Like if we had to think of like one, because I mean, the Peel Commission itself doesn't refer to this. I don't think any of the prior white papers, because I think there were 5 or 6 prior to this.
Oh, you're you're Googling, you're using AI right now? I'm debating you and AI?
Okay.
This was the birth of the Irgun, the Haganah, and the Stern Gang. This was the beginning of Israeli terrorism at this point because the Peel Commission legitimized these illegal colonizers.
Okay, so since the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the British owned, they moved to this mandatory system, the Brits and the French people, to kind of carve out a lot of these different territories in the Middle East so that after some period of time, an emerging government could take over these lands so that they weren't doing all of these colonization projects anymore, right? So obviously in the mandatory Palestine territory, there were a lot of issues with violence that was escalating on both sides, right? I think one of the more notable ones, like I know Jews were fighting against Arabs, but there were also Arab massacres against Jews, like I think the Hebron massacre, and I want to say 29 was a big one that gets spoken about. Yeah, so there's a lot of violence back and forth. I think that initially the idea is that both of these people can live together, they'll figure their shit out, it'll be okay. And the notable thing, so the Peel Commission was a royal commission by the British government that was headed by Lord Peel, and the goal was to do a survey of the land, a survey of the people, and figure out like how do we get these people to work together? Let's account for everybody who's here, what's going on, what can we do? And I think the Peel Commission was notable because for the first time, the recommendation was these two people probably can't coexist in the same state, and that was a big deal at the time because nobody considered up to that point that it was going to have to be two separate countries. Now, that wasn't how any of the mandatory period worked. But this was at the behest of the British. This wasn't like a Jewish plan.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now I don't dispute. I agree with you, Destiny. That I believe also that the Brits came in good faith because they knew at some point that they were probably going to need to figure out some kind of plan to get rid of this land and do it in a peaceful manner. What I'm saying is that the Zionists and what would later become Israel did not approach this in good faith. They came with it precisely for what I said before, to, hey, look, international community, we're doing diplomacy. We want to work with the Arabs. But the plan from the beginning, and this is from Ben Gurion himself, the plan from the beginning was always to take the land in full. Just do it to,
sure.
to do
I mean,
it slowly.
yeah, but I mean, like that. So
you can't negotiate. That's sabotaging peace. They never wanted peace.
Same thing with the Palestinians, though.
Hey, look, international community, we're doing diplomacy. We want to work with the Arabs. But the plan from the beginning, and this is from Ben Gurion himself, the plan from the beginning was always to take the land in full. Just do it to,
sure.
to do
I mean,
it
like
slowly.
Yeah, but I mean, like that. So
you can't negotiate. That's sabotaging peace. They never wanted peace.
Same thing with the Palestinians, though.
Well, okay. Well, realistically speaking, it was their land from the beginning. You got a bunch of colonizers from Eastern Europe.
We can make the excuse for it. But I'm just saying that, like, that neither side. The difference is neither side really wants peace. But the Jewish people, whether it was because of a European background or whatever, were a little bit better at politics. But if the Arabs would have confronted the Jews and said, "Fine, we accept this partition plan. We accept these borders," the Jews would have had to accept.
Okay, now we're getting into 1947. Okay, we can go. Okay, so I think we're done with Peel. You know, your position's your position.
Sure, but also, wait, one more other thing.
Sure, go ahead.
All of the Arabs that were kicked off of the land were kicked off by Jews that had purchased that land. I think it might have been mostly under the Ottoman Empire. Prior.
Back then, and now we're getting into the partition plan. So my position on Peel is that
this is prior to 1920. Like Jews bought land from
by 1947. Stephen, by 1947, they only owned 6% of the land. So they could not have owned more than that in 1937 or in the 20s.
Yeah, but the rest of the land wasn't owned by, people cite that number, but then you pretend that the Palestinians own 94% of the other land. That's not true, though.
Yeah, they're indigenous to the land. It was theirs. They were there before.
No, they weren't there. They weren't there all over the place, right? They had like 12% or something like that. I don't remember the exact numbers, but like people just didn't live all over. The vast majority of the Negev was basically
there were villages all over,
except for some Bedouin. There were some villages, but but not like villages. It was villages of subsistence farmers.
Who owned most of Palestine then at that time?
Nobody did. You have to consider that region, that Levant, existed as kind of like a territory of the Ottoman Empire. Once the Ottoman Empire collapsed, it was the Brits that came in and carved out and said, initially it was a larger area that included Jordan as well, and then they chopped off that, and that became the British mandatory the British mandatory state of Palestine, basically.
Yes,
but
and look,
there's like 6% was I think occupied by Jews. I want to say like 12 or 15% or something was occupied by Arabs, and then the rest was basically just
the Palestinians. Look, so the Brits absolutely messed up here by, basically they made promises to both sides. They had the Balfour Declaration on one side for, the Zionists, Theodore Herzl and them, and then you had on the other side, they were promising, hey, look, if you help us fight in this war, we will go ahead and we'll get you your own land. And that's what the Arabs thought. Okay, the Brits are going to stand by what they said. But so going back to 1937, the Peel Commission, my position is simply this, just to summarize. Ben Gurion, the chief negotiator, the head Zionist here, who would later become the prime minister of Israel, the first prime minister, he negotiated in bad faith. This is proven by letters that he wrote to his son in October 5th of 1937, admitting that the goal was just to enter the negotiations that the Brits had set up with the Peel Commission to give them legitimacy as going from violent colonizers to a potential agreement where they could be taken seriously politically. And he used that. We have to do this. He used that. Hold on. Let me finish. Let me finish my thing. Okay. I'm just giving you my summary on Peel Commission. Then you can give yours. Then we'll go to 1947. So he entered the deal, right? Or he entered the agreements with the Palestinians with the ideology of, we are going to expand. We don't care about what they really want to do. We're just going to go ahead and accept this where it's 20%, but we're going to get all the fertile land. We're going to get all the coastline. And we're going to continue doing what we're doing. We're going to keep using our labor unions. We're going to push them out. We're going to keep kicking them out as much as we can. And then, revisit this later, which they always use that to their advantage. So my argument with the Peel Commission is they used the Brits' Peel Commission to create the veneer of legitimacy, but the whole time, and we know this from Ben Gurion's letters, it was feigning diplomacy to take over and create the entire state of Israel and take all the land.
Yeah, okay, that's like negotiating in bad faith or feigning diplomacy doesn't make sense. Both sides wanted more. Both sides would have agreed to whatever they agreed to. Again, if the Jews would have agreed to some hardcore ironed out borders or some state, then that would have been the state they would have had. But I mean, it's weird to say they're negotiating in bad faith when they're hoping to get more in the future, unless we can say they were negotiating in bad faith and we know they would have betrayed the terms in the future. Number one, so that negotiating in bad faith is a weird phrase to use there. And then two, this Peel Commission, this was just like an evaluation of the land, a survey done at the behest of the British government by, headed by Lord Peel. The idea, this wasn't like a formal agreement. This wasn't like a formal treaty that either side necessarily agreed or disagreed with. It was just his evaluation of, or that commission's evaluation of, what is the status of these two people. So at the time, Jews would have been happy to carve any state out, I think, because then they would have had at least something solid, some kind of solid borders. And Palestinians probably wouldn't have wanted any Jews there at all, or at the very least, they definitely wouldn't want a Jewish state there. So, I mean, you can say that the Jews were negotiating in bad faith, but if we're going to use that definition, then the Palestinians were, quote unquote, negotiating in bad faith either. Although these weren't negotiations. The Peel Commission was not a negotiation, it was just a survey of the land. But neither side, well, at the very least, the Jews would have been happy with some land there. The Palestinians didn't want any Jews there at all, or at least no Jewish state.
Well, the problem is that the Jews wanted 20% of the most fertile land, the best land, and they were the minority. And then on top of that, it's not their land in the first place to dictate. If someone comes into your house and tells you, hey, I'm taking a master bedroom. Hey, it's a small part of the house, though, but I'm taking a master bedroom after you let them in. You're going to feel some type of way about that. And the reality is they were the minority and they wanted the best. It was their land.
It was the British. It was British land.
No, but they were there. They're the indigenous people.
They're not indigenous at all. They were part of prior caliphites that had conquered through imperialism that area. But the land was owned by the Brits. It was the British mandatory for Palestine.
We have Eastern Europeans, literally from Russia, Ukraine, etc. That's what a lot of these Zionists were. They were all majority Eastern European coming into land that they have no ties to. From a bloodline, anything like that, coming in saying we're going to settle and colonize. Obviously, the people that were there that were there originally are going to feel some type of way, and then on top of that, they wanted 20% and they wanted the best land. So
we can say that people felt some type of way, and I agree with you. They did feel some type of way for sure, and they definitely felt like they had. Well, you could say that, but again, all of the land that was taken prior to 36 was purchased by Jewish.
It was not
purchasers of land. It was.
It was stolen.
There was no land that was conquered. No, there was no stolen land. It was all purchased from prior owners.
Stephen, Myron, didn't the Jewish land? Didn't the Zionists go over and buy the Jewish buy land from? Landowners, absentee landowners.
No, even with the absentee landowners. That's what I'm trying to explain to you guys. Now we can go to 1947 partition plan. We talked about the Peel Commission. Fine. Now we're going to get into the partition plan. The partition plan, that deal was insane.
Well, how can we move on from this? I don't know. Jews conquered land. They didn't even have a military army or anything. No Jews conquered land from Arabs prior to the Peel Commission.
No.
It just didn't happen.
No, the Peel Commission gave them the legitimacy to start creating their own paramilitary forces. That's what I'm saying. The Peel Commission gave them the legitimacy, right? So that they could go ahead and create these organizations.
Prior to 36, they bought land from prior landowners. There was no Jewish conquering. Okay.
No,
I don't know how, because even in the Peel Commission doesn't say that they
and even if they
land.
Even if they did buy the land, I'm telling you, by 1947 they only owned about 6% of the land. That is why that's why and this is a big point. This is precisely why the Palestinians rejected the 1947 partition plan, because on top of that, they had been killing people, they had been stealing land. The Peel Commission was a lie. We knew that. And then on top of that, they were the minority, but they wanted 56% of the land. And so notice how the Peel Commission went from 20 to 56%.
Well, yeah. There's a hard. We can agree to disagree again if we want on this point, but
That's
it's like
fine.
a hard bill.
That's fine.
Like before we get to the split on for Resolution 181, the land, like in the Peel Commission itself, right? Just reading from the text, Chapter 4, the disturbances of 1936. So from 36 to 39, there were massive Arab revolts. But like one of the reasons that they list is number 5 under Chapter 4. They say Arab alarm at the continued Jewish purchase of land. There was no conquering of land. If you read, more into Chapter 5, many Arab landowners have benefited from the sale of land and the profitable investment of the purchase money. The Fellahin are better off on the whole than they were in 1920. The Arab progress has been partly due to the import of Jewish capital into Palestine and other factors associated with the growth of the national home. That's referring to Jewish people. But like there was no conquering of land prior to this, or if there is, I've never seen a source on that ever, unless you just consider Jewish people buying land and then kicking off the Arabs once they bought it as conquering. But there was no conquering of the land.
I'm telling you, bro. They were conquering the land. That's why they were able to go ahead. That's why this is the basis as to why the Palestinians rejected all these peace deals, is because, or these negotiations that the Israelis gave in, because number one, they didn't negotiate in bad faith. A lot of the time they were the minorities, and then they wanted all the best land. So how does it, like, and the way I simply explain it, right, to the people here that might not be as well versed in this conflict, let's imagine that you have a home. You allow people to come into your home, right? Because they're coming in and they're poor and they need money, whatever it may be.
No one allowed them to come in,
Hold on.
That
Let me
never
just finish.
happened.
Yeah, they absolutely did. They welcomed them.
They didn't. It was bought. They weren't welcome. They bought the land.
Since
and
the 1800s, they had let them come in and live alongside them, and they work alongside. Then as they started to colonize more and more, they realized, oh, these people are here to actually take the land and kick us out. That's
the original Zionists that moved there were part of a labor Zionist movement. They would never work alongside Arabs. The entire point was that they had to. There's a saying for this in Jew fucking speak or whatever. It was about like working the land that they owned. So they would never be working and living alongside Arabs. Once they bought the land, they expelled the Arabs from the land.
No, and that's the point. A lot of the times they did not buy the land, and then on top of that, they put these labor unions, which I literally said earlier, right, where they would push the Palestinians out and not let them sell their produce, or only do Jewish labor, where they would only do business with each other. So they pushed these guys out. That's what I'm trying to say. This is why the Peel Commission was a bunch of BS. And these Jewish labor unions had been doing this for a very long time. So of course the Palestinians are going to be like, we're not going to accept anything with you guys because you guys are coming in and stealing our land. You guys are pushing us out of our...
We can move to the next point.
All right, let's go to 47.
Wait, just real quick. I'm just going to ask for one thing. I don't do this in just general debates, but I'm just curious.
Sure.
Okay, and if you don't have it on hand, that's fine. But like, what is our source here for like Jews stealing the land? Like if we had to think of like one, because I mean, the Peel Commission itself doesn't refer to this. I don't think any of the prior white papers, because I think there were 5 or 6 prior to this.
Oh, you're you're Googling, you're using AI right now? I'm debating you and AI?
Okay. No hands up right now. I'm not using AI. The only thing I have on my screen right now is the text of the Peel Commission refer to make sure that I'm not missing anything in there.
Sure.
Okay. You keep referring to Jews buying stuff and stealing it and kicking Arabs off. That's not true. If you wanted to make the argument that there was some illegitimate purchase of land, the only thing I could possibly think of was that in the Ottoman Empire, but this also contradicts your other claim of the Arabs allowed the Jews to live next to them. That's not true.
They brought them in as guests.
No, they didn't, because the Ottoman Empire actually explicitly forbade the purchase of land by Jews in the Ottoman Empire. So if you wanted to make the argument of illegitimate land purchases, sometimes Jewish foreign companies would have to create shell companies to buy this land from absent Arab land owners and then do it that way, because the Ottoman Empire wouldn't actually allow Jews to purchase the land before the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in 1917. That's why I know that claim can't possibly be true. They absolutely didn't welcome them in. Number one. Number two,
Myron,
there was back and forth.
What's your source for that?
That the Ottoman Empire didn't allow the purchase of...
No, not for you. I'm asking Myron. Yeah, Myron, what's your source? That the Jews
I'm just curious
off?
with this. Because
yes,
they had
I'm
no
talking
military,
about... Okay.
They had no forces, they had no arms. There's no way they could have fought and conquered land from the Arabs.
If you look at the partition plan, the big reason the Palestinians declined the partition plan is because the Israelis only legally owned 6% of the land. So if they only legally owned 6% of the land that they purchased, how the hell are they going to have all this land prior in 1937 or 1920s? Just work our way back chronologically. 1947,
how much land
they
do you
reject
think
the
the Arabs
partition
owned?
plan. The they owned it. It's theirs.
It's not theirs. It was
theirs.
British. It was the British Palestine. It was the British mandate for Palestine. It wasn't theirs at all. What do you mean? Who would they have owned
And
it
who
from?
lived there? Palestinians. British mandate
Most
for
of it was
Palestine.
empty. Most of it was
Palestinians
empty.
lived there.
But
Bro.
most of it was empty.
Oh my God.
Do you think that Negev desert, even today you can go to the Negev, it's not full of people that live there. You've got like Bedouin tribes. You've got like most people do not live there.
But it's theirs is my point. It's their land. No,
it wasn't. Yeah. It was the Ottoman Empire's land. What do you mean? And then it was conquered by the Brits.
And the Ottoman Empires are what? Arabs.
Yeah, and they lost the war, and their whole empire collapsed.
And then the Brits had it, but it said mandatory British Palestine.
Also, the Ottoman Empire was technically headed by Turks, to be clear.
Whatever. Arabs, whatever. Middle Eastern people, Turks, a lot of Turks speak Arabic. The point I'm trying to make here is this. It's very simple. They only owned it. We know this for a fact. This is why they rejected the partition plan. They owned 6% of the land back in 1947. So there is no way that they owned anything else. The bottom line is this. They were the minority. So if they're the minority, the big minority, why are the Palestinians going to go ahead and concede to these individuals who are violent colonists, stealing their land, killing them? Why would they agree to that? And they had been destroying.
The reason why they agree is because when they did the mandate, we're skipping ahead now to the mandate.
Yeah, we'll go to the mandate. Yeah.
But the reason why is because
Myron, do you have that? I still want to know if you have that source.
That's why they rejected the partition plan. You can look it up. This is precisely why they rejected the partition plan. Is because they owned a minority.
They wouldn't have accepted any Jewish state.
No.
1%, 2%? No, they wouldn't have accepted any Jewish state at all. There was nothing acceptable there.
Look. What I'm trying to explain to you guys, okay, is that there's a multitude of different reasons, because you guys have not been letting me go into why they rejected the partition plan. The 7% is just one reason. I can go through all the reasons that they rejected the partition plan, and rightfully so, because it was a bullshit plan. And on top of that, the Israelis were conducting acts of violence and destroying villages all over the place. They were raping the women. They were destroying the villages. They were killing a whole bunch of people, stealing land, like the Ergun Haganah, and the Stern Gang. We had Jewish terrorist organizations running a rampage all across. Why the hell would they accept any type of deal with these guys? They were destroying them and killing them. So they have every right to fight back and defend themselves and defend their villages. Like, this is indefensible on the Israeli side, and they were a minority of the population in the area. The only reason they had the weapons is because they illegally smuggled them there from the United States thanks to organized crime. And this is the ugly side that
them from the U.S. They smuggled them from Czechoslovakia. They absolutely did not bring them from the U.S. It came from Czechoslovakia. Number one. Number two. I mean, like we just have a total disagreement on the history. The violence was on both sides. Initially, a lot of the violence came from the Arab side in response to the Peel Commission. The huge Arab revolts and everything only intensified after the Peel Commission recommended a partition, and that's why the Brits cracked down on Jewish immigration to the mandatory area. I think at 39 or 40, they basically said they either severely limited it or they said no more, and that's why the Jews started to fight back from 40 to 44, where they started to do things that I think this culminated in the King David Hotel bombing or whatever. It was like one of the worst terror attacks from the Jews to the Brits, and then the Brits just fucked off because they were like, "Fuck this is fucked."
Yeah, and they also assassinated They assassinated a British British official as well when he tried to figure out a plan. The Israelis conducted massive acts of terrorism before they created their state.
Everybody was conducting acts of terrorism in Jerusalem. The Palestinians, I think, murdered the Jordanian king when he was in Jerusalem. I think at 48 or 49. So I mean, like, everybody was doing their terrorisms and fighting each other and blowing each other up back then. It wasn't like there was one peaceful side accepting everybody.
Well, here's the difference. Whenever Israelis conduct terrorism, no one cares. No one says anything. But when Arabs
what do you mean? Everybody cared back then. Hold on, that's absolutely not true. The curb on Israeli immigration was one of the biggest reasons why, or not on Israeli, I'm sorry, Jewish immigration was one of the reasons why the Jews got so ass-pained in 1940.
Okay.
It was because the Brits, they felt it as a betrayal of their promise, plus there was the ongoing Holocaust, and there were ships being turned back full of Jews that weren't allowed to go to where they thought they previously had, as per the Balfour Declaration, the ability to send their Jewish people to. So the Brits absolutely
Americans,
down on that.
Most people in the West and most Americans are completely unaware of who the Ergun is, who the Stern Gang is. They're completely unaware of these terrorists.
These are paramilitary groups that didn't exist past 48. Who cares? What do you mean?
It rebranded into IDF, which is conducting terrousm right now as we speak. They literally just changed the rebrand
into the IDF. They were disbanded, and then they IDF
rebranded,
was the military.
Haganah, Stern, they all combined and rebranded and became the IDF.
The Haganah literally set fire to and laid siege to the Irgun when Menachem Begin came back into Israel from the Mediterranean.
And he's a terrorist too.
that's fine. But Ben Gurion stood on the shore and he watched as the Haganah literally blew this ship up that they were coming to shore in and started arresting people from the Irgun because they didn't want to be associated with them when the state of Israel was formally properly made, and then the Haganah eventually reformed to the IDF. But like, yeah, they disavowed and they fought with a lot of more radical elements.
Yeah, of course. But
Stephen, Irgun and Lehi did join Haganah in the end, though.
Yeah, they all joined.
They kind of did, but the Haganah was by far the larger.
You're taking one isolated incident.
It was like 20,000 plus strong, wasn't it? And the Irgun and the Lehi combined had like what? Like wasn't it like less than 2,000 or less than 1,000?
Regardless, the point I'm trying to make here, like you're taking one isolated incident to try to dispute the fact that they all combined. They did combine. They did. They're all terrorist organizations, and they rebranded to become the IDF. Yes,
the Irgun and the Lehi formed in response to Arab terrorism and Arab violence as well. That was the reason why these organizations formed, was because they felt, especially post 29 after the Hebron massacre, they felt like they were being attacked by Arab extremists constantly, and that's why these paramilitary organizations,
because they were stealing land.
Even formed initially.
They were stealing land. They were killing people.
They
were colonizing. They're like, dude, it's. The reality is that the state of Israel was created through the very terrorism that it tries to condemn every single day. But let me go into the 47 partition plan real quick, right? So European Jews started colonizing, obviously, for decades already. They banned Palestinians from land and labor markets. We talked about that earlier. They promoted exclusive Hebrew labor, evicted Palestinians from land and farms that were fruitful. This is why they had the right to reject this partition plan, because they had been kicking them out from before, since, like I talked about with the Peel Commission. That's another reason why they rejected it. Also, the partition plan was, for which I think is 210 is what you're saying, 56% for under 33% of the population. So at the time, they wanted 56% of the land, but they were less than 1/3 of the population, right? That doesn't make sense. And they only owned, they only legally owned 6% of the land. Does that sound like a good deal to you if you're a Palestinian? You're gonna be like, hell no.
Legally owned. When you talk about legally owned,
what they purchased,
this weird assumption that the Arabs own the other 93%. That's just not true, right? You can't source that. There's no record of that because that's absolutely not true. Number one. Number two, when you say that they were going to be given 56% of the land or whatever, the division, look at the ethnic division of who was to live on that split. It was going to be 55% Jews and 45% Arabs. Whereas on the Arab split of the land, it was like 99% Arabs. So yeah, there were a few percentage points more given to the quote unquote Jewish government there, but almost half that population was going to be ethnically Arab people. Number one. Number two, a huge chunk of that land was the entire Negev, which was like empty, dead land that nothing was even going on through. Anyway, and
that's what they wanted to give to the Palestinians. Thank you for saying that. The Negev desert was a part of what they were going to give.
Excuse me, look at Resolution 181. Look at the partition plan. What the whole Negev was going, that was part of that 56%.
Oh, this guy's using AI and Google. Here, I can do that too.
What do you think? I studied this whole issue for a year.
Yeah, okay.
No, go look at the map. Go look at Resolution 181. Go look at the partition. All the whole Negev was going to the Jews, and look at the delineation between ethnicities that were living on both parts of the partition. You can see my type shit.
So here's the other thing too. Also, that's important, because you mentioned earlier that you said that the Arabs would live within amongst the Jews. Yeah, but they would have to be under their rule. So,
correct.
Yeah, so they're the minority of the people, but they would be ruling everything. Why would they want?
Well, they wouldn't be ruling everything. They'd rule their partition, that they had 55% Jewish majority on and 45% Arab.
Yes. But what I'm saying is, I think it was like 16 districts or whatever, and 9 of them were Arab dominated, and I think only 1 was Israeli dominated, or Zionist dominated, Jewish dominated. Why would you want to go ahead and live amongst people and they rule you and they're the minority? Why?
Well,
why would you do that?
The majority in the state that would have been carved out for them.
Yeah, but why would you want Jews to run you as an Arab Muslim when they're the minority? Why?
I agree with you. You wouldn't want that, which is why my original claim is that Palestinians would have rejected everything. Correct. There's no amount of partition that they would have accepted. But that goes to my argument in saying that there was never a peace plan. Every deal to them was a bad deal.
No, but it's and that's what I'm trying to say. The Israelis,
that's my position.
No.
Any deal with Jewish people.
No. The deal, every single deal that the Jews brought forward was bad because, number one, it was done in bad faith. Number two, it was to extend the land. It was never done, oh yeah, let's actually have some kind of peace or anything like that. And they always wanted the best land, the best fertilization areas,
not the
waterways.
Land. The best land is the West Bank.
No. Well, we're going to get into the West Bank after this, because the West Bank is that's later on. That's going to come into 1967.
They did not want the
we
best
haven't
land.
even got it. We haven't even got into the West Bank. The West Bank is actually even worse, because we haven't even got it to 1967 yet. We're still on 1947. Yeah, what's
Yeah,
up?
can I ask
but
you-
the partition that you're talking about, the eastern part of the partition, would have been the west bank of the River Jordan. It was, but this land I think is way better, is way more fertile, and it looks better and everything too, compared to the shit land that is the entirety of the Negev, which is nothing. I think is still nothing. And then compared to you have your coastal regions, right, with Jaffa and Haifa and Kaffa and all that bullshit. I don't know.
Well, they wanted during the appeal commission, they were fighting to take that. That's what I'm trying to explain to you, bro. Like they always
they also would have
they
had,
always fought to get the best land, right? Most fertile land, and that's what a lot of this problem came from. And they were the
land
minority.
that was fertile was only the land. It was only fertile because they had made it such.
No, that's not true. No, okay. It was. Why would, if they were there first, if the Palestinians were there first, and how would if the land was there, if they were there first and the land was fertile, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, they're going to want to take it and be like, "Oh, I want this land now."
Not fertile. That was the whole point of labor Zionism. It's why the first two aliyahs failed fucking miserably. The 1881 and the 1901, the first ones that came from the Eastern Russian Empire or whatever, is because the land sucked shit. There was nothing there. Most of the people that came just fucking up and left afterwards because it was so bullshit. It wasn't until they had a ton of financial funding.
Yeah, it wasn't until they started stealing land. That's
didn't
precisely
steal land. The land sucked shit. The land, they were not exporting a lot of shit. The Appeal Commission found this. Every early white paper found this. They were subsistence farmers that lived throughout all of Palestine.
And
they
fine.
just made enough for their family. That's it. They weren't exporting crops to anybody else.
But the point I'm trying to make is, it wasn't until they started stealing land that proves my point even more with the Aliyah, with them coming in the 1800s.
Proven anything about them stealing land? They haven't. They bought it. They purchased land.
So all these massacres, all these paramilitary organizations just existed for no reason. The Ergun Stern gang, they were just hanging out. They were just hanging out
in response to Arab violence. And understandably, the Arabs started to fight against the Jews that were buying land and moving there. But that's where the Lehi and the Ergun formed. Was in response to a lot of these Arab attacks.
Destiny, I told you already. By 1947, the Zionists had only owned.
1947 is really far away.
No. But I'm saying by 1940, because you have to work it back. If the Zionists only owned 6% of the land where they purchased it, they actually owned it, it's theirs. In 1947, how would they own any land prior to that legally? They had even less. That's what I'm trying to explain to you.